funding, DFIs, donor spending, public finance is still slightly higher than private spending. And a lot of that is driven by the role of DFIs and also the role of governments in grid investments. Moving through to 2030, we see private sector spending grow around sixfold to reach $90 billion US. And you may remember that this is the figure for current energy spending today. So that really represents how significant an increase is necessary here. Now, to achieve this scale-up of private finance, we see a number of levers being pulled. We see reforms in the enabling environment. We see efforts to lower the cost of capital and to deploy a range of innovative new financing mechanisms, including things like green bonds, asset recycling, and importantly, mobilizing domestic sources of capital. But it's also important to note that concessional finance plays a key role to allow that private finance to grow. So concessional finance can be used to de-risk private investments, particularly in nascent markets or new technologies. And according to our estimations, it will require, by 2030, around about $28 billion in concessional funding per year in order to leverage that $90 billion in private. And there are a lot of different ways that this blending of concessional and private funds can occur. You can see this happening at fund level, at project level, lots of different credit enhancement tools that can be used. And within the report, we go into a lot of detail around different case studies where this has been successful and can be replicated. But that is also the reason why we have a panel of experts in the area and practitioners on the ground. So on that note, I'll end here and pass back to Rebecca, and thank you for your time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Emma. So now with all that context, it's like we've all read the executive summary. Phew. Wonderful. Thank you, Emma. Thank you. So let's have a very brief chat, as Emma said, with a few key industry experts to unpack what this means for actually doing things differently in terms of attracting investment. Allow me to introduce our three panelists, Mr. Michael France, the team leader for Get Invest, Mr. Chinua Azubike, the Chief Executive Officer for InfraCredit, and Ms. Kombe Ajebo, the Vice President for Product, Solutions and Sustainability at the Africa Finance Corporation. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Oh, I think I take this one. Great. Now, I'm getting a lot of time signals from the back of the room, so that means that we're going to be brief. So absolutely no pressure to make these the most amazing and insightful comments that you've ever given. No pressure at all. Michael, I want to start with you. Because one of the things that Emma pointed out for us is that if we're going to achieve this sort of universal energy access scenario by 2030 in the most optimal way, there's going to be need for a major influx of investment towards decentralized renewable technologies. And that's a lot of what Get Invest does. Right. So why don't you share with us some successful approaches that you've seen at addressing the specific gaps in the financing landscape towards attracting private sector investment for renewables?
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Michael. I manage Get Invest. I've spent 16 years in supporting private sector investments in clean energy in Africa, and I want to talk today about the opportunity. Our role at Get Invest is to support companies to become bankable and access the capital that was identified here. We're supporting right now 200 companies in the clean energy space all over Africa. And what I want to really highlight, there is so much innovation happening here in the clean cooking space. I met electric cooking companies here. That is really on the rise. I believe we should do more LPG. In the off-grid solar space, which will play a transitionary role in the mini-grid space. E-mobility, there are players here. E-mobility, and it will interact greatly with grids, with mini-grids. What we need, however, for that is matching finance. And I'm really appreciating the work of IEA in this report to identify the gaps that are there. There are solutions already for this. At IEA-AfDB, you have CEFA. CEFA does exactly this. It breaks down big chunks of money, makes it available to the innovative, to the dynamic, often also African companies that need this kind of capital. We have a severe equity shortage. We have data on this. We have many companies that could take a lot more debt if there was more equity. But we need to also make it more accessible. It's too cumbersome to get that money out of the banks. Yeah? We still have a ticket size problem. We have a cost problem, of course. We need concessionary capital. And we have a local currency finance problem. But there are already ongoing solutions for this. We need to scale those up very dramatically, and thereby we can harness the dynamic potential and what is already happening. It's almost like an avalanche. It's accelerating in private sector. It's happening, and I'm very grateful again for the power that IEA has mobilized, that AfDB is mobilizing to make this happen. Thank you. That was my 2 minutes.
Thank you so much, Michael. There could be more debt if there was more equity. I really like that.
A lot more.
Yes, yeah.
Karen,
My husband is a financier. That's the mantra of our house every morning. There could be more debt if there was more equity. So I completely agree. Chinua, that actually transitions really nicely to you and what I wanted to ask you, because another thing that Emma pointed out to us is that it's not going to be just about the amount of finance and increasing that, but also the role of different types of capital. And she talked about, for instance, the need to mobilize private capital that will have to become the focus area of concessional funds. And we know right now that for every dollar that NDBs provide, we're mobilizing about 25 cents of investment. I think the AfDB is above average at 32 cents, according to our own WRI analysis. So given InfraCredit's work on providing credit guarantees for corporate bonds and so on, can you tell us what are some of the successful solutions that are working to leverage private capital through concessional finance?
Thank you very much. So InfraCredit, we were established as a specialized credit enhancement facility to provide local currency guarantees and mobilize domestic resources from local pension funds, insurance companies to finance infrastructure development in Nigeria. We're backed by the Sovereign Wealth Fund and international DFIs like AfDB, KfW, AFC, and also Infraco Africa through Page and private insurance companies. Now, over the past 5 years, or 60 of operations today, what our model has proven that there is significant amount of untapped domestic resources that can be mobilized to finance Africa's development. We can deepen the penetration of these assets in our capital market, and we've been able to help finance long-term, 10 years, 15 years, and even 20-year financing from domestic pension funds at fixed rates of borrowing for power plants, and we financed with our guarantee. A hydro was able to raise 15-year financing, a green bond. What was very interesting about that project was that they came back subsequently and raised money without a guarantee because the pension funds became comfortable with the credit risk. And so this means, that the perception of risk versus the actual risk really isn't as it appears. And we can scale by collecting data. But again, cost of capital is high because inflation is high in our market. So local currency can appear to be more expensive. But how do we fast track capital mobilization? Because in Nigeria and like most African countries, we have significant amount of pools of domestic resources with our institutional investors. We can blend. And to fast track our transition, we need to mobilize these overseas development aid and assistance and concessional grants and leverage that with private capital. And we've done that. We have been able to work with the FCDO, who provided first loss subordinated debt that allowed us to mobilize insurance companies to lend to distributed renewable solar electrification in rural communities in Nigeria, which seemed impossible. 7-year financing, local currency, average cost of financing inside of 10%, and this allowed up to 7,000 households to be electrified. We're also doing something similar with, rural telephony. Again, this is very important as we look at rural infrastructure. We're financing solar power telephony in over 155 local governments, over 22 states. Now, this is possible. And how do we scale? We want to leverage CEFA. We believe that all of these pools can be more coordinated. If these models are replicated and scaled, we can be able to truly bring the data out to demonstrate that the ability to pay does exist. The data would help us to actually leverage from billions to trillions using our domestic resources with development aid or concessional financing to drive our path to self-reliance. So the models are there, they exist, and I do believe that with a better coordination to support existing structures that have demonstrated that ability to innovate. I think we could do more. And the rating agencies, I just wanted to add that recently we got a rating that put us at a notch above, 2 notches above the sovereign, which actually means that actual infrastructure as an asset class is more resilient and can be priced at a better risk than sovereigns, especially when you have private sector participation. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Michael. So it sounds like we have the models. It's really about better coordination. And that makes me happy because that sounds like a solvable problem, the coordination part of things. So thank you for that, Michael. Kome, I want to come to you next. Because another thing that I really enjoyed about what Emma said was that if under the most optimal scenario by 2030, about half, I think was the number that I saw on the graph, half of this financing for clean energy would be coming from the private sector, and importantly, private sector on the continent. And we know that Africa generally falls behind in terms of domestic institutional investors supporting the clean energy space and climate solutions more broadly. So could you tell us, from AFC's history of experience, what are some of the winning formulas for encouraging more investment from the continent to be directed towards projects, especially infrastructure type projects?
Thank you, Rebecca. I know we're running out of time, so if you take nothing away from what I say today, remember this: we need more AFCs. We need more AFCs, and I'll tell you why. AFC, created just 15 years ago, has invested $11 billion on the continent to date. We are a homegrown solution to an African problem. African money, African people, solving African problems. That's the first thing. If you remember nothing else I say, please remember that. Now, switching to sort of homegrown solutions, which is what Rebecca asked, I think some of the winning formulas and some of the things we've done is thinking very much holistically about the problems we're trying to solve on the continent. We have an ecosystem approach, which means we tackle problems from multiple angles. We're a pioneer in the project development space. We started that very early, many years ago, when many other institutions weren't doing that. Some of the critical examples of projects that we've worked on: just this Sunday, we will be launching the Djibouti wind farm, Red Sea Power, 60 megawatts in Djibouti. We developed that project from scratch. No one brought the project to us. We went to country, sat with the government, tried to understand what their needs were, and developed that from soup to nuts. And we also did that innovatively. So we funded the construction using bridge equity. We don't have time. You know, President Adesina has said it. We do not have time to theorize about Africa's problems and focusing on providing lanterns and whatnot. We need more sustainable solutions. So that's one example. Another example is Singrobo Hydro Project in Cote d'Ivoire, which we also developed and is close to construction. And in Cape Verde, we also developed the Cabo Verde wind farm project. We're an equity investor in that as well, and we're looking to expand. This is an African entity trying to solve African problems holistically. So if we can have more institutions like ourselves doing the same thing we're doing alongside us or independently, we will get to the $200 billion very quickly. But we really just need to focus on pragmatic solutions. And I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Kome. We need more AFCs. I feel like that's going to be another new mantra for me. Thank you for that. Really excellent to know that we just need more institutions that are taking this kind of holistic approach. I'm getting a lot of signals. So we have time for one question from the audience for our panelists. We don't. I'm hearing that we don't. So I will request that you do come up and find them afterwards to ask your question. I understand that we have there's another session that wants to come in and use the room. Apologies for that. I have so much more that I would love to ask about the equity, about the blended finance, about AFC. But I think what we can take away from this is that it's not about necessarily brand new ideas. There are models that work. We have to scale them together. So with that, please a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you so much. Thank you for that. Wonderful. So our last, as we're closing, sorry? Brilliant. So we're closing now. And I think that these examples from our speakers give us some practical, successful approaches to work with. For a rousing call to action as we close, please allow me to invite Dr. Kevin Kariuki, the Vice President for Power, Energy, and Climate and Green Growth at the AfDB.
The bank president, my boss, Dr. Adesina, Feti Birol, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, and thank you all for gathering here today. We have a real short period of time, so I'll be very, very brief. On behalf of the African Development Bank, I wish to thank you most sincerely for your participation in the launch of this very important report. We appreciate the International Energy Agency for their continued engagement and collaboration with the African Development Bank. Your commitment and cooperation has made this launch of this report possible, and we look forward to collaborating on more regular basis to shape, secure, a sustainable energy future for our planet. I think the most important thing today is to highlight two key things. Number one is the issue of clean cooking. We must reprofile clean cooking. And we believe that this report will be a very useful starting point for this particular process. And secondly, another area that we don't speak often enough is the issue of energy efficiency. We say energy efficiency delivers the cheapest megawatts. So again, this is an area that we want to focus and prioritize going into the future. So I sincerely hope that this report that has been launched today kickstarts a concerted effort towards establishing definitive pathway to universal access to clean energy on the continent. We very much look forward to working closely with the project sponsors, co-investors, donors, and governments, many of whom are in this room today, to facilitate the alignment of available expertise, funding, and opportunities in our noble pursuit for universal energy access by 2030 to modern energy for all Africans on this continent. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. And finally, to close the session, allow me to invite Dr. Dan Dorner, Head of Strategic Initiatives Office at the IEA. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Rebecca. I will also be very, very brief. This has been a really excellent event all the way through. Thank you so much for all of you for participating and being here with us today. Likewise, I would like you to remember one thing, actually, which is that as Dr. Birol has said, as President Adesina has said, we are really a data warehouse at the IEA. And I want to let you into a little secret that we don't just make this data analysis and insight available to President Adesina, we make it all available to all of you. So it is all readily accessible and available to all of you, both this report available on our website, free to download, but all of the insight, all of the work that we do. So please do use it, please do make the most of it, please do engage with our analysts. We're really keen and inspired and happy to help wherever we can. I think as we've heard today, very many inspiring stories, very much an attitude of what can be done. And we really need to make sure that we take that forward from here and make that happen. The scales of finance required in the grand schemes of things really are not that daunting. And we should not be daunted. We should see that it is a necessity, it is an opportunity, and that we all want to work together to make it happen. Very, very lastly, I will say, from the IEA's perspective, it's been such a great privilege and opportunity to be here at the Africa Climate Summit. It's been really amazing. We've participated in so many great events and engaged with so many partners. We also feel, having been here, but also more broadly, we talk about the concept of the IEA family. And most recently, as just another example of that, is this report, but also just a couple of months ago, we saw Kenya and Senegal enter the IEA family as our latest members. Again, just another really strong example of the partnership that we have across the African continent and that we want to see continue to grow. I'll stop there. Thank you so much to our excellent panel. Thank you so much to our distinguished speakers, to our amazing partners at the African Development Bank, and to our wonderful moderator, Rebecca, for the event today. Thank you.